Aruna lost her legs and her people. A lonely cowboy found Aruna when she was on the brink of death and saved her. They thought they had found each other, but fate had other plans. This is a story about the price of survival and the most brutal betrayal. And before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. And write in the comments what country you're watching from. The canyon of red dust stretched beneath the scorching Arizona sun, a great and harsh land that was home to Aruna's tribe. The name Aruna meant bright star, and it was given to her for a reason. From a young age, she was different from the others. She was faster, smarter, and braver. The blood of great warriors flowed in her veins. The elders said that fire ran through her blood, and she was the only woman in the tribe taught the art of combat on equal footing with the men. By the time she was just 16, she was already leading parties, guiding them in hunts and defending their borders. She was the living embodiment of their strength, their hope. But the tribe's hope was extinguished in a single day. It was the day the men had gone hunting, and Aruna was leading a group of women and children to gather herbs by the creek of whispering reeds. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the roar of gunshots. This was no ordinary raid. It was an ambush, set by a band of merciless marauders who called themselves the Iron Riders. They wore dirty European clothes, and their eyes burned with a thirst for gold and violence. Aruna, grabbing the old rifle she always carried, stood in front. She knew they couldn't escape. Her task was to buy them time. She fired quickly and accurately, but it was like trying to stop a storm. The ambush was perfect. The marauders, waiting for most of her bullets to be spent, began to advance. One of them, a bearded giant, fired his sawn-off shotgun at a cliff face above their heads. The roar was deafening. A huge boulder, dislodged by the shot, came tumbling down. Aruna, without a second thought, yelled for the women and children to run, and she herself tried to block their path. She fired at the boulder, hoping to change its trajectory. It was a reckless act, but it worked. The boulder deflected to the side, but its fragments, scattering with terrifying force, rained down on her. She felt a searing pain, as if 1,000 knives had plunged into her legs. The world went dark. When she came to, she saw that her tribe had escaped. The marauders, believing her to be dead, did not pursue them. The men of the tribe found her upon their return from the hunt. They brought her down into the canyon, where they held a council. The elders, their eyes filled with grief, delivered their verdict. "Aruna, you are our pride, our courage," the chief said, his voice trembling. "But the body is a warrior's tool. Without your legs, you are a burden. We cannot risk the entire tribe for the sake of one, even the brightest star. The desert does not forgive weakness." It was not a betrayal born of malice. It was a betrayal born of harsh necessity. They left her to die, giving her only a flask of water and a handful of dried meat. She was a star that no longer shines. The sun beat down mercilessly. The pain was a constant companion, but Aruna clung to life with the same ferocity with which she had fought before. She crawled, gripping sharp stones with her hands, her spirit unbroken even as her body treacherously weakened. On the third day, as her breathing grew ragged and her eyes blurred with darkness, she heard a sound. Not the clatter of strangers' hooves. The measured, calm thud of a lone horse. From behind a rocky outcrop, he appeared. A cowboy. On his face, weathered by the desert winds, was not the arrogance of a conqueror, but a certain quiet weariness and sadness. His name was Silas. He spotted her from afar, a dark speck against the red earth. He rode over slowly, dismounted, and silently examined her. In his eyes there was neither pity or disgust, only a strange understanding. Silas gave her a drink from his flask, carefully lifted her onto his horse, and wrapped her in an old blanket. He asked no questions, expected no thanks. He simply took her to his modest adobe cabin, lost in the endless desert. In the cabin, Silas tended to her with silent care. He cleaned her wounds, shared his meager food, and fashioned a pair of crutches from branches. Aruna, accustomed to harsh treatment, accepted his kindness with suspicion. Why was he helping her, a useless cripple? What did he want in return? One night, as the desert wind howled, Aruna asked, "Why did you save me?" Silas was silent for a long time, staring at the flickering fire in the hearth. "Once, I too was left for dead," he replied quietly. "An old prospector found me. He didn't ask who I was. He just helped. Now it's my turn." A strange bond formed between them, woven from gratitude, compassion, and a silent understanding. Aruna learned to live anew, relying on her crutches, her spirit gradually reviving. Silas watched her, and in his eyes, something like admiration appeared. He saw her strength, her unyielding will to live. But the peace was deceptive. One morning, at the doorstep of their cabin, appeared the very riders who had attacked Aruna's tribe. They had tracked her down. Their eyes burned with malice and a thirst for revenge. Silas understood that their secluded refuge had been found. "Go, Silas," Aruna said, her voice filled with resolve. "They've come for me. You shouldn't suffer because of me." "No, Aruna," Silas replied, gripping the handle of his old revolver. "Now we are together." An unequal battle began. Silas fought desperately, covering Aruna, who, despite her injuries, threw stones and shouted at their enemies, fueling their rage. But the odds were against them. At the very moment Silas took aim at the marauders' leader, a bullet fired by one of his henchmen found its mark. It struck him directly in the chest. In his eyes, there was no fear, no pain, only a deep, piercing regret. He staggered, and his hand, gripping the revolver, went limp. The world began to slowly fade, turning into a blurred, crimson stain. He looked at Aruna, at her fierce, beautiful face of a warrior. He saw in her not just a woman he had saved. He saw in her his own redemption, his last hope for goodness in this cruel world. He wanted her to live. More than anything, you must. He gasped, trying to draw a breath. Blood bubbled on his lips. "Live, Aruna. Live for both of us." And his eyes closed forever. Aruna's fury was limitless. The pain of loss was forged into an icy hatred. She grabbed Silas's revolver, her hands trembling, but with only one purpose: revenge. She charged at the enemies like a berserker, an embodiment of wild, untamable rage. Her movements were swift and merciless. She killed them one by one, until the last marauder fell lifeless at her feet. Aruna stood over Silas's body, bloody, trembling, but alive. She had taken her revenge. But at what cost? The one who had given her hope, who had seen in her not a broken cripple, but a warrior, had paid with his life. The revenge felt hollow, as empty as the desert in which she was left once more. With the sunrise, Aruna buried Silas on a hill overlooking the endless desert. She did not cry. There were no tears left. She simply moved, performing her final duty. She carved his name on a wooden cross, and next to it, she drew the symbol of her tribe, a bright star that had been extinguished too soon. This symbol became the symbol of their shared fate. She left, once again alone. Leaning on her makeshift crutches, she returned to the very desert where she had once been left to die. But now in her heart lived not only the pain of loss, but also Silas's iron will, his quiet kindness, and the lesson that even in the cruelest world, one can find humanity. She walked east, toward where, according to her tribe's legends, a new star rises after the darkest night. She walked, not knowing what awaited her. But she knew one thing: she would survive. For herself. For Silas. Against all odds. But fate had other plans. At the end of the day, when Aruna, exhausted and drained, stopped to rest by a stream, she heard the sound of hooves again. This time there were many. From behind the dunes, riders appeared. Not the ones who had attacked her tribe. Not the ones she had fought with at Silas's cabin. These were soldiers from a nearby fort who were tracking the marauders. They surrounded her quickly and silently. One of them dismounted, approached her, and said something in an unfamiliar language, pointing to the west. Aruna understood nothing. She simply shook her head wearily. In her eyes was neither fear nor malice, only an endless, all-consuming weariness. Weariness from the pain, from the struggle, from the endless loss. She closed her eyes, feeling herself being lifted to be placed on a horse. Not an enemy, not a savior, just another stranger. In that moment, as she was carried away from Silas's grave, away from this desert, away from everything that had become dear to her, her will finally broke. Her body, pushed to its absolute limit by the battle and the long, lonely journey, no longer wanted to resist. In her mind, a final image flared: Silas, standing by the fire, his face illuminated by the flickering flames, and in his eyes that same quiet sadness she had come to love. Then this image was replaced by another. Her, a little girl, sitting on top of a hill and looking at the stars, her father telling her that she was the brightest of them all. And then came the darkness. Not a frightening one, but a soft, lulling darkness, like a warm desert night. Aruna died that same night on the road, in the arms of the soldiers who never understood who they were trying to save. She was buried in an unmarked grave on the side of the road, her name unknown. The bright star of Aruna was extinguished forever in the endless expanse of Arizona. No one learned of her last battle, of her love, or of her tragic end. Only the wind continued to whisper her name over the lone grave of the cowboy, a reminder of two broken hearts that met and were lost in a harsh land.